All right, it's time for the meeting to come to order. This is March 26th. It's a special meeting. Valerie, could you please do a roll call?
Yes. Mayor Coombs?
Present.
Council members Bagley?
Here.
Finley? Here. Levison? Here. Samori?
Here.
Santos?
Here.
And Witt? Here. Mayor Coombs, do you have a quorum?
Thank you. Let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to start with public invited to be heard. So when your name's called, could you come down? You've got 3 minutes. Please give your name and address. Our first person is Judy Lubau.
Good evening. My name is Judy Lubau, and it's Lubau. Anyway, I live at 106 Granada Court in Longmont, and I'm here to talk about Fastracks and the options that I would hope Longmont would support. Longmont voters voted for rail service when they overwhelmingly supported Fastracks in 2004. Please conform to the wishes of the Longmont voters and insist that RTD build rail service to our town as soon as possible. Please don't support bus service, handouts, and second best. If you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. The hybrid option cannot guarantee us rail service in the foreseeable future. If times again get financially bumpy, and I suspect they will, RTD could fall back on giving us the bus service, the PIG, and not give us the rail service once again that they've been promising. Please don't give them that option. Insist that RTD give Longmont the rail service as soon as possible because we have been promised it and we're paying for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Malone.
Hi, Mayor Coombs and members of City Council. My name is Sherry Malloy, 2113 Rangeview Lane here in Longmont. I've contacted you all. I'll be very brief. Please support rail for Longmont as soon as possible. Rail is the right thing for the people of Longmont, present and future. Rail is the right thing for the region. Rail is the right thing for the environment. Rail is the right thing for the economy. I dare say rail is the right thing for RTD. Please take a strong position for rail in Longmont. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Marilyn Hughes.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thanks for the chance to talk. Marilyn Hughes, 1126 4th Avenue. I attended the Transportation Board meeting with RTD, and I heard an excellent proposal from the Transportation Board to move the rail to Louisville and get it into Boulder County. I thought that was a great proposal. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I'll speak again as a taxpayer. I've been paying taxes for rail since 2004. I think that's 8 years. And I am willing to pay more taxes if I'm going to get rail before I'm 93, because I'd really like to use it. I'm a traveler, and I think that the opportunity to have rail and get to DIA, get to Denver, is just something that's going to be special for our community. And I just think that we should support rail. So I'm really hoping the council will, and I thank you for this time.
Thank you, Marilyn. Kay Fissinger.
Running late, so I'm a little breathless. Kay Fissinger, 2199 Creekside Drive. RTD is not listening, but perhaps they are listening and they believe they can massage the issue, and out of desperation, frustration, Longmont will cave. Either way, they're reading this one wrongly. RTD, the answer is no. No, we will not accept a consolation prize of bus rapid transit. No, Longmont will not approve a tax increase without an ironclad guarantee of commuter rail to our city by 2024. If Longmont wants to be a 21st century community, then you as our council must reject all efforts to deny our community a 21st century transit system. The vision must be long range. It must carry us into the rapidly changing circumstances that will define the next 50 to 100 years. Longmont has counted on rail to help us develop a 21st century development vision, but rapid transit doesn't cut it. It will never cut it. In 2004, Longmont voted for a measure that guaranteed rail to Longmont. That is a legal guarantee that we now have. Tell RTD no in the strongest possible words. They can do whatever they wish tomorrow night, but the last word comes from the voters. If RTD won't listen now, they will have no choice but to listen in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. All right, we're going to have a special presentation for the Regional Transportation District. Are they going to present?
Mayor, yes, we have tonight the chair of the board, Lee Kemp, is our district rep, and he has key staff members with him, Scott Reed and Nadine Lee, and they will make the presentation to the council and then entertain questions.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Lee Kemp. I'm chairman of the board for RTD, and I'm also the District I representative, which represents Longmont down to Bloomfield. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for coming up again to explain where we are in regards to the updates and so on for Fastracks and helping move the program forward. First, I want to make sure it's very clear that if the RTD Board of Directors chooses to proceed with a sales and use election in 2012, an amended Fastracks plan will be referred as part of the ballot question. To clarify, the RTD Board of Directors does not have the authority to unilaterally change the use tax and debt authorized for the original Fastracks plan. It will take the vote of the people. So no matter what, if there is no vote, it stays as was agreed to in 2004, and that would be to complete the system as originally voted on, but would require then that the system, as revenue becomes available, it would be completed, and as projected right now would be in a 2042 time frame. That is why there was options put together in regards to helping accelerate, at least addressing transportation needs earlier rather than later. The three options were looked at, and listening to people as we have up here and rest of the region, we also came up with a fourth item, a hybrid option, and that was to add BRT down 287 up the diagonal, which on the diagonal would include building the rail stations so that when the segmentation of completing the rail, as is still embedded in the hybrid option, the stations would be built sooner rather than later and allow for the completion of the rail system, but also be able to address sooner rather than later having additional service coming up the diagonal up to Longmont in the meantime, instead of waiting till the late 20 time frame in regards to getting rail completed. But adding also a segment coming out of Longmont down 287, where we would go down into US 36 and interconnecting other local municipalities like Lafayette and Erie to be able to give them service as well going down there. The rail is not removed from this plan. And I have to agree, in regards to how, is the rail ever going to get done? Part of the thing that if we did elect to go to a tax ballot in 2012, it would require some type of ballot language that everybody would feel comfortable with, that this thing will get done, that the revenue, that if there's changes, this is what's going to happen if these changes occur during the time frame of getting the rail completed. So even if we were to decide to move this program forward, there's still going to be time as we move forward to identify how that ballot language has to look. And that ballot language will be vetted through our stakeholders throughout the region before it's ever placed on the ballot. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. Rail is not off of the map. It's just that we're trying to address additional needs, additional sooner rather than later opportunities as we get the rail completed. Now, Scott and Nadine Lee are going to go through and explain the technical side of this, and then we'll be more than glad to answer more questions. But I'd like to introduce Scott Reed and Nadine Lee of the staff and have them do the presentation, unless you have questions for me right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting us back to speak to you. Well, I guess I shouldn't say inviting me back because I haven't been here for a while, but inviting RTD back. And I appreciate you asking us back, because I understand that there are some clarifications that you might be seeking in order to advise your decision tonight on where you fall within the range of options for consideration by the RTD board. So thank you for giving us the time to talk to you again. I'll just start by saying that the slide that we have up right now, we were trying to give you an idea because we've had a lot of questions about what types of outreach we've conducted related to this decision that we're trying to make. We've conducted over 20 meetings since mid-December, trying to reach out to all of our stakeholders, including the general public, in a couple of meetings. A lot of the city staff has been involved in those conversations, including a two-part charrette that we conducted to look at possible BRT options as we were developing that map that you've seen before and you'll see again tonight. We have additional meetings scheduled through the month of April as well, so I wanted to let you know that we are continuing our outreach with all of the members of the public, as we make this decision. Do you want to move to the next slide, please? So you all are familiar with Northwest Rail, obviously. A couple of points I want to highlight for you. We're obviously negotiating with the BNSF, and part of our negotiations is for shared freight and commuter rail service. The opening day service levels that we're looking at are 30-minute peak headways and 60-minute off-peak headways, and that's for the rail. And we're looking at an opening day service that allows roughly 27 round trips a day. We're looking at the number that we've been looking at is 55 trips a day, but that translates into 27 round trips a day. And just wanted to kind of remind you of that. I think you're all familiar with the stations, mostly the First and Main station here in downtown Longmont. And I know that you all are finishing up your station area master plan, and it looks fantastic. So I congratulate you on getting to the end of that process because it takes a lot of time. Next slide, please. Just to recap, the annual program evaluation that we do every year is to advise, to develop the financial plan that is part of our Senate Bill 208 process. It's a report that we do that the Denver Regional Council of Governments reviews every year, and we have to get our financials reviewed and approved by DRCOG so that we can move on with our daily business. Obviously, this year, one of the reasons we're looking at it is because we're considering this idea of a ballot measure, and so we want to get all of that evaluation and analysis wrapped up before we would develop any ballot language or make a decision to go to the ballot. So that's part of why we do this annual program evaluation. And as you recall, the 2011 costs for Northwest Rail in the annual program evaluation were about $894.6 million. And so that was last year's number. As we were looking at the number this year, the cost for Northwest Rail ballooned to $1.7 billion. And just so that you understand what that represents, that's a 2024 completion date as opposed to a 2020 completion date, which is what our assumption was last year. Nobody was more unhappy about that number than we were, because we knew that that was going to be a difficult number to talk about with our stakeholders and with the public. And so, as we were considering this and what that meant for our affordability in our annual program evaluation and what it meant for DRCOG to look at as they were evaluating our financial plan proposal, we knew that we're going to have some hard conversations. And I'll just remind you that, this is really an affordability question. I know that a lot of people want us to build this rail now, but I can tell you right now that that's just not possible. So, this is a hard decision we have to make, and we just kind of have to move forward and try to figure out the best way to provide some mobility options for everybody. So as we were starting to roll out this information about the number for Northwest Rail, we had a lot of conversations with various stakeholders in the corridor. The U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition in particular asked us to look at options, and that's recognizing the fact that it's really not acceptable to anybody to have to wait so long to get this transit option, and we recognize that. So we really put our thinking caps on and we started to look at some options on how we could provide the mobility that everybody was asking for and make it less costly. And so we came up with 3 options, and I think you all are familiar with the 3 options. Obviously the first option was to stay on course, recognizing that the Northwest Rail would have to be delayed in its opening by about 4 years. And then the second option would be, again, to keep the Northwest Rail on course and then try to implement some interim options or early action items, such as accelerating some of our capital improvements, mainly at the stations, implementing some interim bus service that would help to relieve some of the congestion in the corridor. And that was actually a very specific request from the Mayors and Commissioners Coalition. The third option was very draconian. We were suggesting that we remove Northwest Rail altogether and use the cap of the $894.6 million to implement BRT in the corridor. And this one, we felt strongly that we needed to at least consider it. Whether or not it was a good option, I think everybody has a different opinion about that, but I think it was important for us to look at it from a financial perspective. And as you also know, last week, or actually on March 5th, the RTD staff actually recommended sort of a blending or what we call a hybrid option of all of these, which was to say that we were suggesting that we would initially build bus rapid transit by 2020 based on what had been option 3. We were going to do that network of bus routes, providing high frequency service at about 15-minute headways. And then we were going to also extend the Northwest Rail to Church Ranch Station because we felt like it was important to try to make an investment in the rail and try to get that going, recognizing that we couldn't do the whole thing, but if we could start implementing the rail in phases, that would be something that we could continue to work towards, is the completion of the rail. And then part of the proposal with the hybrid option was to make sure that we also continued to make investments in Northwest Rail using the original Fastracks tax so that we would eventually build out the entire rail system. And so, again, I think Lee mentioned this, the rail is still part of the recommendation. And last week, the Fastracks Monitoring Committee made a recommendation to the full board to move forward with the hybrid option. And so the committee made the recommendation to the full board. The full board will actually take action on one of the options tomorrow night. And I'm going to turn things over to Scott. He's going to talk a little bit about the frequently asked questions that we've received, and then I think we'll begin a little bit of a dialogue between us and the council members. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine.
Good evening, and I can say thank you for having us back here. Did want to run through a few questions that we have received. We received a list of 46 questions from the the Mayors and Commissioners Coalition along US 36, from also including Longmont Council and others. We put together a list that had been sent out, and I want to cover some of the questions that were most frequently asked from that, and I know these are some that also we touched on the last time we were here. First question is, will RTD fulfill the promise to complete commuter rail to Longmont, and if so, by when? The answer is yes. We will complete the Northwest Rail in its entirety. The first segment, as proposed in the hybrid option, would run up to Church Ranch, and Longmont does remain in the program under the original 0.4%. So from Church Ranch to Longmont remains funded by the original sales tax as approved by voters and will be completed. The funding is projected to be available during the time period of 2028 to 2034. We are able to narrow that down as soon as we get information back from BNSF that we are anticipating within the next few weeks, and that will allow us to know what that cost proposal will be for that segment. And again, as we've talked about before, Northwest Rail is different than any other rail corridor that we have because we have to keep that as a shared freight rail corridor. We are not able to simply purchase the right-of-way and build an exclusive light rail or commuter rail system, in this case commuter rail. And we have to work directly with BNSF on that because we are injecting a passenger rail system into their profitable, long-term operating freight rail system. So that's why we have to work with BNSF on that. RTD will explore the cost of additional segments, one of them being to Louisville from Church Ranch, once we do receive more information from BNSF. And that includes the projected cost for that Church Ranch segment. And as I noted, RTD will work with BNSF on the feasibility of the next segment running from Church Ranch to Louisville. We did very clearly hear the City Council on that and received the proposal from Jeff Ilsman, discussed that with him directly a couple of different times. He's been to many of our meetings, and we really appreciate the input that we've received from him, a very good suggestion that we will be taking a look at. How much will the initial segment of commuter rail to Church Ranch cost? Our current estimate, and again, this is pending detailed information from BNSF, is it'll be between $350 and $425 million in year of expenditure inflated dollars. Other question is the 894.6, including prior expenditures, which includes the end-of-line station, the $17 million for the First and Terry site that we are again waiting for the master plan to be completed so we can let that contract and begin construction. That is included in that. Is that enough to build a BRT system that meets the mobility needs of this corridor? In coordination with stakeholders, we did identify the proposed capital improvements and operations plan that is necessary for a successful BRT system. As an illustration of that, taking that BRT system when it is completed, at least by 2020, that trip aboard BRT down 287 will be faster than taking a commuter rail when that is completed to Longmont. So I think that's an important thing to note. This is a permanent investment that we're going to be making in BRT that will be supplemented by rail as that rail system is affordable and built out in that 2028 to 2034 timeframe, with that first segment completed to Church Ranch by 2022. We will be able to, we did develop a cost estimate incorporating the assumptions in terms of operations, and that does fit within that funding cap of $894.6 million. So the short answer to that question is yes, and that will provide the mobility needs for this corridor on a more immediate basis, still keeping the rail in the plan long term and providing both. You will have two, if you look at the map there, you have two BRT lines that serve Longmont directly. The only entity here that receives two BRT lines, plus you will get the Northwest Rail in its entirety. Thank you. The other question, and that was touched on earlier by Chair Kemp, will RTD agree to developing an enforceable document with stakeholders to provide assurances that the remaining partially funded corridors will be constructed? Again, the answer is yes. We will work with our stakeholders throughout the district to identify specific language that will be reflected in an amendment to the Fastracks plan. What will be voted on if the Board of Directors does decide to go to an election will be voted on by the public, by the voters, will be referenced in that ballot language. And the amended plan will, should the Board of Directors again decide to move forward with an election, will be referenced directly, so that is a binding document there. And as Chair Kemp said, we will work directly with the stakeholders and others to come up with what is an acceptable step forward on that. And as far as next steps, Lee, did you want to?
Yes, Mayor, Council, next steps will be tomorrow night. We will approve, vote on an option to move forward to DRCOG. That does not mean that we have voted to go to a ballot. What it means is that we are moving a proposal forward for DRCOG to then vet and make sure that it's feasible to be able to move it. Now, if we were to move the hybrid option forward and it is approved at that time, it would have the assumption that the revenue stream would start in 2013. But at that time, until we get that approval from DRCOG, we will not be stating anything about going to a ballot until we hear that the proposal has been cleared. And then in June of 2012 is when it's anticipated DRCOG would then either tell us, no, our assumptions are wrong, or yes, assumptions are correct, make your decision. Now, during that time frame, until August the 15th, is when ballot language has to be written in a formalized ballot would be accepted to be put on there. Now, we'll declare a lot sooner than that whether or not we're going to go to the ballot, but what I'm trying to say is we have the time frame between now and August 15th to make sure that whatever language would be put on there, if we were to go to a ballot, that language does meet what everybody can support. So there is time between now and the actual verbiage that goes on there. Just want to make sure that was very clear. And we'd open it up to questions.
I have a quick question. What if we took the Arapahoe Road out of the BRT and threw that extra funding towards an earlier completion of the rail to Longmont? I mean, do we have to spend the whole $900 million on BRT? Because I see that there's a Boulder road option and the parallel. It seems like they're getting a lot of service into Boulder.
Well, let me muddle through it a little bit. Nadine's going to jump up and pull me into the right direction. Now, remember, what we're doing as we're following the Northwest Rail up, we're building those stations that would be used for BRT now, but would then also be for the Northwest Rail. So it's getting them at least built sooner rather than later, but also being able to provide earlier, immediate transit needs for people that are traveling up through that segment. Is that? Let me.
No, Lee got it right. I just wanted to add that and kind of emphasize what Lee was saying, which is that we were trying to address the access and the flexibility of movement that Northwest Rail was going to provide by doing the BRT the way it's shown. So the route along Arapahoe Road was trying to get people from Louisville to Boulder, directly into Boulder, not so much the south end of Boulder. And so what we were trying to accomplish there was just giving people that accessibility both directions the way the rail would have. And so we put that service in on Arapahoe Road. And to answer your question directly, I think it's safe to say that any money that is saved in the BRT option could be applied towards the rail. How much would actually make the rail come sooner, I can't really tell you that right now.
It's not like we're in a city where funds have to come out of a certain bucket and you can't take funds from this bucket once it's dedicated, that the BRT bucket and the rail bucket are just preliminary buckets and you can move monies back and forth between those two buckets if you want to at a later date.
I think so. The only nuance to that I can't really speak to is the new tax versus the old tax. So anything from the new tax, I mean, we've capped the budget at $894.6 million. And the way it's worked on US 36 is that's a cap, but it's also a max that we are willing to provide to the corridor. So if you came in at $800 million, there's still $94.6 million left that I would expect RTD would be willing to put towards the rail.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Santos.
Mayor, if I could just have one question Lee answered before you guys get into your detailed questions. During the Dr. Cog annual performance evaluation, is that done by Dr. Cog's staff, or do they hire outside consultants to complete that review?
They hire an outside consulting firm that of their choice to be able to go through those numbers and then come back to them, and then it's voted on by the Dr. Cog board as well. So it has to be even voted on by a whole nother set of board, but I think there's even representation up here on the Dr. Cog board, as well as Boulder and Broomfield. I think Broomfield, one of the council people is actually the chair of the Dr. Cog board. So there's a major process that goes through on this to make sure that what is presented is feasible and is supported by the region.
Okay. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you. This council, Lee, and thank you both. Thank you, the three of you, for coming. This council passed option 2, if you'll recall, that basically put the hurt on every single line, because I kept hearing from Phil Washington, and I keep repeating myself because I kept hearing the same thing, was that not one corridor should feel all the brunt of all the pain. So when I went to that March 5th meeting, anticipating and just saying, hey, the city of Longmont's in favor of option 2. Find out at the last minute there's a new option, this hybrid option. And Nadine, to what you said is that now it's my understanding at that March 5th meeting, because I was there, that eventually we'll get to Longmont, and the RTD staff would take every year to the RTD board a recommendation or to see if it's financially feasible to do the next segment of rail. And then the question was, eventually we'll get to Longmont. So it's my understanding now from last week's meeting that RTD has put some dates in here, 2028 to 2034. Are we competent? And Nadine, I read your quote is based on our financial projections, we can get it done in 2028, 2034. The financial projections, Lee, have not been very good. And I'm very concerned that what the voters voted for in the city of Longmont to bring rail here and add another segment of ridership, not just buses, but a new segment of ridership on rail is not going to materialize. Because the third option, and I remember that was you're right, it's a very draconian option. But it seemed to be the one that RTD staff was pushing. And I was very upset at the March 5th meeting. I'm still not sure, because now it's a hybrid plus option, because now we have dates in there. But I still don't see any assurances. I don't see any guarantees. And I would have rather have seen some of that in options, and then later on seen in the ballot language. But I refuse to support any of the options. I really like the letter that the mayors and the commissioners coalition put together, along with the US 36 Solutions in the city of Longmont, stating this is what we'd like to see, but we want those assurances or guarantees or whatever you want to call it. Lee, and I saw you on Channel 7. I can't guarantee anything, but we're guaranteed rail right now. And that is the hardest part for me to swallow, is that we are guaranteed something that we have paid $70+ million into to build everyone else's down south. And I had several of the board of directors come up to me and say, "Oh, we're in favor. We're gonna make sure that we get it completely built." Please, you got yours. The rest of us are left holding the bag. I mean, Jeff Ilsman brought up a great idea. I'm glad to see that RTD is actually listening to us and to what we have to say about at least getting a toehold in Boulder County. Show us the commitment. And I'll say it again, I'm not seeing the commitment from RTD. I think staff's doing the job that unfortunately they have a tough job, RTD staff. But I think it's the policymakers are not showing us the commitment. We still have the place down on South 287 that's empty. It's kind of a blight. Again, a promissory note for $17 million that write us the check. We'll put it away. Write us the check so we can put it away. So when it's time to build, that's the only thing we can use it for. And I'll do a intergovernmental agreement to specify that's all we can use it for. But at this time, the only thing I will support is the letter that was sent. I'm not going to give in to, because I don't know what's in the fine print. You guys haven't provided us. It continuously changes. And I'm not going to vote to support something, so later on I have to pass it to understand what's in it or read it. I don't think so. That was done in another legislative body on something very important. This is very important to this community. I'm not going to pass or give my stamp of approval on something and then so I can go back and read it later. I think again, the mayors and commissioners coalition letter is very well stated. I was there for that meeting, and with these options that you've given us, 2028 to 2034, I was just reading something last night that they're looking about doing rail from Victorville in California to Vegas. It's 120 something miles, 150 miles, and they're going to do it potentially in the next 10, 15 years. We voted for this in 2004, and we're not even going to see anything potentially until 2028 or 2034. And then again, what happens when you guys don't reach those dates? What do we get in return? Besides hey, you still owe us the tax.
Mayor Pro Tem Santos, may I respond?
Yes.
To some of your
Sure.
questions? Guarantees. Yeah, definitely. I can't guarantee that it's going to get done other than I can guarantee that as the voters approved in 2004, Northwest Rail will get completed. Will get completed. Now the time frame looks to be 2042. We're trying to identify how do we get it done sooner than that. That's the only guarantee, is that this whole system will get completed, no date certain, under the original scenario. Now, what kind of surety do we have from 2004 to now? We have over 40% of Fastracks under construction or bid ready to go ahead and be completed. We have all the corridors now ready, contract ready to be put out for bid should we get a new revenue stream if we were to go to a tax ballot. That is something that we did not have in 2004. We had at the best maybe a 5% engineering capability or prospectus, and with no EISs being completed or anything. All of those items are done. They're all done and ready to go out for bid. And once again, over 40% of Fastracks is under construction to be completed. That gives us that much more surety of what we're saying will get done, will be done. Now, 2028 to 2034, I wish the words could be taken back. No, sometime in the future. I think that was a poor choice of words, whoever made that statement. I think what was meant by that was we just couldn't give a date certain. Now we've been able to, since then, and the meeting two weeks ago, we've been able to at least come up with a range. No guarantee that it can be done in 2028, 2029, but we can get it done in that range of 2028 to 2034. I think that, that at least puts a good expectation on when it would be completed. The other thing is to be able to accelerate getting options up here to address transportation needs. Putting in this 287 element truly addresses a whole nother segment up here that was never part of the Fastracks program, but will be additional service for Longmont going down to US 36, and yet maintain the fact that the Northwest Rail will be completed. I just wanted to, and you're absolutely right. You have been so supportive of Fastracks. I know you have, and I know how frustrating this is. You have been supportive on seeing that this thing gets done, and I don't like standing here right now telling you this, but things move forward. We have to continue to keep things progressing and moving forward. All I can say to you, Mr. Santos, is I'm sorry. These are the new facts. I do feel very comfortable with them now because of the fact that we have progressed so far from 2004. That's all I can say.
Lee, how do you...
Councilmember.
They actually let me back in. Thank you.
Okay.
But how can you immediate transit needs in 2020? That's 8 years away. That's not immediate.
Inject the word more. It's more immediate than.
Yeah. It's not immediate. This is, again, and I've said it, and I'll continue to say it. Everyone's getting theirs. You bought off Westminster. You got the Boulder County Commissioners, and you got in the city of Boulder. That's all they want is the BRT. Everyone else is getting the shaft. I do not see how, and I'm going to hold RTD's feet to the fire. You know, I'd like to see it done in 2024. I'm not going to roll over and say, oh, please go ahead and just do what you want, RTD. Baloney. Go ahead, Chris.
Address a couple things.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Couple things here. One, you talked about the way things were back in 2004, and Chair Kemp did touch on that. As far as the planning that we have now, we have at least 30% design on all of the corridors that have come forward. We do have, as Chair Kemp said, 40% of the contracts have been let or are already under construction, so there is much more certainty. We did definitely learn lessons on what we projected. We took a 30-year projection, which at that time had included 2 recessions. Was approved by Dr. Cog unanimously, and we felt that that was a reasonable assumption. Clearly, that turned out to not be the case. What we've done since then, we have come back by reduced by about 25% our sales tax assumptions. During that time, we have established a sales tax working group, which includes professionals plus agencies from throughout the RTD district that participate in that take a look long-term, plus we use the economists like Patty Silverstein to take a look at that and see what is a reasonable projection on that. We also have a construction cost inflation working group that is also made up of professionals from throughout the region.
And when were these brought together? These folks brought together?
These have been in place for 4 years now. And this is done through Dr. Cog. I don't believe that Longmont has participated in those, but they are more than welcome to. The invitation has been open every year, and we would love to have Longmont's participation if you are interested to see how that process works. And I think that the other thing we clearly want to do is to be as conservative as we possibly can. We have looked at what the cash flows will allow us to do in the worst possible scenarios. We have, and it's hard to envision, but we have a graph that shows what the cash, what the revenue assumptions are versus the expenditures, and we have widened the gap between those expenditures and the revenues to give more certainty, to give a much larger contingency than we previously had in the plan, and we feel confident that that in fact will be the way to go forward, that it is a much more conservative and a much more certain plan than has ever been put forward before. Now, you also said that you had questions that had not been answered. We're willing to sit down with you anytime, any place, any amount of time. We'll go through the plan page by page, line by line, if there is something specific that you have questions that remain that we have not addressed.
The questions that I have are, what assurances do we get? You can't make the 2028 to 2034 date. What do we get besides more promises that maybe will come to Longmont?
As we said, we will go through that in terms of what is an enforceable agreement, work with the stakeholders on that, with what will be embedded in the ballot language to address that scenario. Now, again, given the fact that we are dependent upon the economy, we are dependent upon sales taxes coming in.
And I understand that because I have defended, hold on, because I have defended, and Lee, you know this, I've defended RTD during the downturn in the economy. I had people coming up to me and saying, hey, what are they doing? They're just wasting money. I said, no, unlike all governmental entities found, the downturn in the economy and sales tax. But when you miss your projections of this whole project by half, people are starting to wonder, where is our money going?
And that's exactly what I was trying to address earlier. Our sales tax collections are 40% less than what we had originally projected for the Fastracks program. We recognize that. That's why we have taken these very serious steps in trying to address that short-term and long-term. And we, again, would love to have Longmont participate in that sales tax working group and in that construction cost inflation group. We'll be happy to send the information. And again, if there's anything specific that you want to sit down and review through the plan, we're more than happy to do that.
Scott, can I ask you a quick question? Let's say now you've gone ultra-conservative. You've backed down your projections. You have more data. Is it possible that, let's say, the economy does take off and we do have more ridership and gas prices stay a little high and people start using public transportation, is it possible that that 2028 date could become 2026 if things are more rosy than what we're projected? I mean, projections can go either way. I mean, they can go.
We believe that that's exactly the case. We've had, if you look at what our sales tax projections were versus what we are collecting right now, we are slightly ahead of those projections, and the economy is nowhere near in full recovery. So we believe that that is exactly the type of scenario you will see. That
But you don't want to paint a picture.
right.
Yeah,
But that's why we're sticking with this extremely conservative process that has a much higher contingency and has an annual review process that is built in not only through DRCOG, but through these sales tax and construction inflation working groups that we have in place.
Well, again, I mean, of all these options, the only thing I will support is the MCC, the Mayors and Commissioners group, because I'm not willing to go tax the hell out of us to get this, sooner than later.
Councilmember Samori.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Well, I'll try to keep an open mind about everything you guys are talking about. I do appreciate your time and effort in explaining to us. But I'm looking at the original option 2 that we supported, where we would have rail by 2024 plus bus service. So why was that removed from the table as an option when it sounds very much similar to what you're providing with the hybrid?
The staff recommendation on that took a look at, again, what the transit mobility needs were from throughout the region. And as far as the BRT, being able to provide the 2 BRT systems, which again are permanent investments, that we believe that helps address that in a shorter time frame, that if you look at the total ridership that was going to be offered by Northwest Rail, the 30-minute and 60-minute maximum that you will ever get in terms of service frequency on that, and the fact that we can add additional BRT, plus the fact that we kept Northwest Rail in the plan, the full Northwest Rail, and the ability to work with BNSF now to get segments on that we believe was the best plan that offered the most affordability and also the most flexibility while moving many more people than the original plan.
And that may be true. However, what you've heard repeatedly from the community is that they would like to have rail here sooner than later, So if option 2 would have delivered the rail to us in 2024, with additional mobility through bus service, and maybe it wouldn't have handled as much passenger service, but it still would have covered more than what is being currently covered, why not stick to that second option? Since it was endorsed by council here 100% and also by the letter that was sent by the mayors and commissioners.
Well, I can go through it again.
Well, no, you don't need to. Okay, here's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. It seems like RTD is deciding for the community what is best, as opposed to listening to what the community wants.
What we heard from, and this was prior to receiving letters, as we did all of the outreach that we talked about, there was no consensus in the US 36 corridor. We had areas that wanted BRT only. We had areas that wanted rail only. If you take a look at option 2, with the acceleration of some of the elements, including the stations, that is very similar to that portion that is included in the hybrid option, that we accelerate building those stations, but we get them in place as BRT stations, and we provide that BRT service in a shorter time frame, keeping the full Northwest Rail plan in place that can be served, that can then serve those BRT stations. We will leave the BRT service in place. We will be able to add a BRT line down 287 where it's to serve communities that have no access to the rail line. and we'll provide more mobility options for them, as well as providing two investments, 2 lines to Longmont, and then 2 investments, including the BRT system as well as Northwest Rail.
Okay. Well, I guess for argument's sake, I would argue that there was consensus based on the original vote that was taken in 2004, where everybody agreed that they want rail, right? So the BRT piece of it was only supposed to be to Broomfield originally? Boulder?
Assuming that there was a major investment from the Colorado Department of Transportation that has not materialized.
Okay, so why are we talking BRT if that investment hasn't materialized, and why not take the funds and put them towards the rail? Because again, what I'm hearing, the emails that I've gotten, what we heard here tonight, is that we would like to have the rail by 2024. I mean, that's the citizens speaking. And that was one of the options. Why couldn't we go back to that particular option and instead of having 2 bus lines, have 1 bus line? I'm just...
Well, I think I've walked through, the reasoning on that, and what the staff recommendation was and what was approved by the Fastracks Monitoring Committee was the hybrid option, again, which we believe delivers the mobility options that we talked about, that we believe will work better for the near term and the long term, keeping the full rail in the plan. It does extend the build out of the rail into that 2028 through 2034 timeframe. We recognize that, but again, that's the option that we believe was the best and that was put in front of the board of directors, and the board committee last week did approve that.
I guess the hesitation that you're hearing and sensing and feeling is that we've had many dates thrown at us as to a potential completion date, right? Originally it was going to be, 2013, then 2017, then 2020, now 2024, 2028, 2034. And Mayor Pro Tem Santos, said it clearly, is that how do we know that for sure we'll have it in 2034? I mean, you tell us you ran the numbers and being conservative. And having served on the Citizens Advisory Committee, I remember hearing that the numbers that we were being projected when I was serving on it were conservative. So what's conservative, I guess?
Well, and again, if there are things that anyone wants to sit down and look through that financial plan, look through the assumptions and how they have been updated in the process we've used, more than happy to do that.
Councilmember Witt.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've been pretty clear that all I'm looking for is a butt to kick. I want accountability, and I think that my council members are, from conversations I've had, were unanimous in that sentiment. I am looking at the letter sent by the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition, and I also agree that the questions that are asked in that are questions that I have as well. The concern that I have specifically around BRT, I am concerned that what's going to happen is that we're going to just throw out more buses and call that BRT, and that worries me because that's not BRT in my estimation. Now, I would like to know in your cost estimates, and I am glad that you have expanded the possibility of better commuting options to Lafayette, Louisville, Erie. I appreciate that for my neighbors, but at the same time, my primary responsibility is to fight for my citizens, and my citizens feel that promises are being made to enough other communities that in order to get this passed, that in the end we will be put off, and we'll never get ours. Can you tell me a little bit about, in the cost estimates, are we talking about dedicated lanes for BRT?
There are two different types of BRT that we're looking at. The first, we call them freeway running and arterial running. The freeway running is what we're implementing on US 36. We're putting in a managed lane. It'll be, in the case of US 36, it'll be used by buses and single occupant vehicles that are paying a toll, and also HOVs, high occupancy vehicles. That same concept we have estimated putting onto State Highway 119 because we think that's an appropriate place to have a dedicated lane for buses in order to get that transit priority and make sure we have reliable travel times. So that's the freeway running concept. The arterial running concept is what we would see on US 287, State Highway 7, possibly South Boulder Road, depending on where those routes ended up going. And what we're talking about with the arterial running BRT is to do queue jump lanes at the intersections so that the buses won't be held up at the stoplights. They can kind of go and jump the queue, get to the front of the line essentially, so that they can get across to their stations as soon as possible and then get back into the lanes and be able to run down US 287. As we were looking at US 287, it has not appeared that there's as many congestion problems as you would see on 119. So our priority was to put the queue jump lanes there and then also provide the transit signal priority so that the buses can actually go ahead of the rest of the traffic that's waiting at the light. And then you had some other questions about what the BRT would look like. The way that I've always described the BRT to everybody as we've gone through this visioning process for the BRT is that we're trying to make the bus as rail-like as possible. And so that means, cashless fares, so ticket vending machines at each of the stations. We're going to have stations that look more, a little bit more sleek, we hope, with the new canopies. It's not just going to be a bus shelter there. We hope to do, or we have accounted for in our cost estimate a new fleet of vehicles that would probably be uniform for all of the BRT operations. And then, of course, in terms of doing the BRT service or implementing BRT, you have to talk about service and the frequency of service. So what we proposed actually specifically to Longmont is a minimum 15-minute service in the off-peak. Every 15 minutes the bus will be there for you. And in the peak period, it's about 7.5-minute headways. And so that's a big difference from what we were hoping to do on the rail. But our plan was to make the BRT as convenient as possible because we wanted to attract the ridership. So again, trying to make the BRT as rail-like as possible was our goal.
And would it not be possible, instead of, it would seem to me that the BRT concept is an idea that should stand on its own and have that be voted on the people, and go ahead with option 2, as Councilmember Samori indicated. I think a lot of people are very interested in that option, but that's not Fastracks. That's not what was voted on in 2004. Would you entertain the idea of going with option 2 and then have a standalone idea to fund the BRT?
Okay.
I think, again, given the way that the ballot language, you would be looking at 2 different votes, and we'd have to talk with our legal counsel, but on that, I think that you could not fit that under single subject. So it would have to be 2 separate votes on that. And, again, the plan that we have at this point in time is a hybrid of option 2 and option 1 that does still deliver the full rail and still does provide an expanded BRT system. As Chair Kent noted, we do not have the ability to unilaterally change that plan. That would have to be put before the voters, and the voters will have to vote on that one way or another. Otherwise, we go back to the 2042 timeframe for only Northwest Rail.
Okay.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Santos. I recognize that you gave up your position in line. Thank you. I've got a few questions, a few comments, and a few challenges, a couple favors to ask. Number 1, I'm going to throw you a softball. It's been 8 years that we've been paying this tax. Can you name one benefit that Longmont has gotten from the fast track tax?
Anybody who travels along US 36, the very first investment that was made was along US 36 from Fastracks. All of the slip ramps that have been built from park and ride to park and ride, previously you had to get completely off of the highway to go up to the Broomfield park and ride, come back down. Anybody who travels along that corridor has a much faster commute time than they did previously.
You do realize that we're not on Highway 36.
And that's one of the reasons why we believe that making investments on Highway 287 make more sense than only making an investment on US 36. However, if you also look that embedded in the original tax is the $17 million we are that we have budgeted and are committed to for the end-of-line station, and that we are waiting for the master plan to be completed, and we can let that contract out and begin construction.
But as of today, nearly 8 years later, we still have not gotten the $17 million. So as of today, there's not one single benefit that Longmont has seen.
The master plan to be completed, and we can let that contract.
Okay, but as of today, we don't have it.
Contract has not been let because we have not received the master plan completed.
Okay, I guess two thoughts. You know, there's two images that keep coming to mind. Okay, I love entertainment, television, movies. One of the worst scenes I've ever seen in a movie that just makes my gut wrench. Have you seen Saving Private Ryan?
Yep.
Where at the very near the end of the movie, the American Jewish soldier is upstairs, and the Nazi comes up, and they get in a hand-to-hand combat, throws him on the ground, and he takes his knife and starts going shh, 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 and just kills him. I kind of feel that way with the RTD board, and kind of feel that way with the rest of the RTD district. I'm getting sick of fracking. I'm getting sick of the airport. I'm getting sick of RTD. I'm getting sick of people telling Longmont that we're going to pay your bill. We got to shut up and take it. It gets old. I've only been on council 4 months. The second image that comes to mind is when I was a kid, the old Peanuts cartoons. Charlie Brown would put up the football, and then Lucy would put up the football and say, "No, really, Charlie Brown, this time you can come kick it. I promise I won't move it." And I never thought, "Oh, Charlie Brown, you can do it." I think, "You idiot, why are you even trying?" So those are the two images that keep flashing through my mind. One is we're going to be forced to do whatever the rest of the people in the RTD district want, even though we're paying for more than they are. And then the other one is it's our fault if we do this, because the only thing dumber than paying for a train you don't get is paying for it twice. And so in contract law, I always joke with my clients as well that I say, you set the price, let me dictate the terms. And the one thing that the 2004 ballot doesn't have is a deadline. I will give you $1 billion tonight, I promise. I am going to give you, ironclad. I'll give you sell me a pen, I'll pay $1 billion for it. But if there's no due date, you're never going to get your money. So that's what we're kind of locked into, meaning that back in 2004, it doesn't get more ironclad than the 2004 ballot. It said this is what we're going to get, and we didn't get it. And so I hate to say it, Mayor Pro Tem, but I'm with you. I want a guarantee, but I don't think such a guarantee exists. I really don't. Because in the end, they can always take it back to the ballot. They can always change it. And so I'm sitting here listening to the presentation, and I'm frustrated. Because if I were you folks, I do not envy your position. I realize what you're trying to do. But at the same time, the only way out of this mess is to get communities like Longmont to give their blessing. And so I guess as I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, so what's the solution? I guess my solution would be what I would ask. You want my vote and support. I would like the only guarantee I could literally think of until that northwest corridor is finished. I want a guarantee in the ballot language that states that each city will get a pro rata expenditure, meaning that I want what we're paying in until the northwest line is complete. It means if we're paying 5% of the overall money, I want 5% of the benefit until that northwest line is complete. Because right now, our money, okay, I mean, I'm not sure. I've been asking these figures forever from everybody. I don't know how much Longmont pays. Actually, I do. $8.2 million a year total to RTD Fast Track. we're not getting that benefit out of the program. So those are the kind of, when I hear I want a guarantee, those are the kind of guarantees I want. And if not, personally, what I think we should do, I think we should put a second ballot initiative on there that basically gives Longmont citizens the option to opt out of Fast Track. Because as much as I want to train, I don't think it's coming. I hear promises, but I honestly don't think it will ever come. If I did, I'd be the first person in line. But I'm frustrated and a little angry with the board. And I don't even know you folks, at least you two a little bit better. But my dad had a saying growing up, you know, you BS your friends, I'll BS mine, but let's don't BS each other. Because this train ain't coming. And even if you think it is, there's going to be 4, 5, 8, 12 generations of RTD leadership, and they can't offer that same emotional guarantee unless it gets on the ballot. And even then, what we're seeing is even the ballot doesn't count. So where I'm leaning at this point, if they're not willing to give us a guarantee that they will spend X amount of dollars on Longmont for Longmont, I think we should put a ballot initiative on the ballot that says we're out of Fast Tracks, or second best option, leave it the way it is, because I don't want to spend more money on a train that's never going to come.
Can I respond?
Sure.
To
Go ahead.
Well, I do give you credit for creativity. You're the first one who's used the Private Ryan deal there. We've heard the Peanuts one before. As far as the reality is, yes, that the Northwest Railroad will be built. Either way, with an additional sales tax or without. The question of is, when do you want it? Do you want it sooner or later? That's really the main question. And the other scenario there, in terms of the percentage thing, it is interesting. Everywhere we go, people are certain that they are a donor to that, to, you know, the overall. So I think that that's a pretty universal feeling on that. As far as the guarantee process, again, as I said, and as Chair Kemp said, we're willing to work with the stakeholders in terms of what would be a reasonable, doable ballot language reference on that. And, you know, we have not completed that process and are more than happy to work with City of Longmont and Council on that process as well. So, Lee, did you have
I think I'm going to jump in the queue here. I'm going to use some of Sarah's logic, where you just talk your way through logic options until we kind of come to a consensus. So bear with me. You know, the way I see it, you know, leadership is about being flexible and adaptive. You know, the would have, could have, should have, you know, looking backwards, not going to buy us anything. It might make us feel better, but it doesn't solve the problem. You know, we have to make one or two choices, probably, is we can choose to support the hybrid option and help see the process, at least through the SB 208 process, and or we can choose not to support the hybrid option. Those are our only two options that I think that we really have realistically right now. So let's evaluate reasonable reasons why one might choose not to support the hybrid option. One does not want the possibility of the tax passing because he or she thinks it puts the Longmont taxpayers at risk without any ironclad guarantees. I mean, that's one argument that we're hearing pretty soundly. One does not trust the voters in the entire RTD district to vote to defeat this tax, even though they feel the citizens of Longmont want it defeated. One really wants to defeat the rail because he or she thinks it's a very illogical way. I'm not saying that this is what everybody thinks, but I mean, these are just throwing out possible reasonings that people might think. You know, one really wants to defeat the rail because he or she thinks it's a very illogical way to affordably provide mobility to this corridor. And then let's also evaluate reasons one might choose to support the hybrid option. Those might be, one truly believes that the hybrid option is perhaps the best of both worlds because it serves two different types of clients. One believes that ironclad guarantees cannot possibly exist in a world where economies can go up, down, and sideways, and ridership projections and sales tax projections are difficult to project long term. A projected timeline of 2028 to 2034 for the rail is way better than never. One believes that the leaders should work to let the people who are going to pay the taxes decide for themselves. I think we should trust democracy. Let the voters decide how this is going to play out. I'm leaning towards letting the process at least advance forward through the DRCOG SB 208 process. I'm a little bit disappointed that RTD did not give the hybrid option modification advancement to Louisville. At least it looks like you're looking at it now, so I commend you for that, and I do appreciate that. One thing that I did learn when I went to the National League of Cities meeting is that voters will pass a tax on an issue if they know what they are going to get and when they're going to get it. And unfortunately, I think RTD is going to have to do, at least through the 208 process, is going to have to do a better job if voters are going to pass this, I think. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, leadership is also standing up for your community when it looks like you're about to lose everything that you voted for, and not rolling over and just taking everything at face value, which seems that you're indicating.
No, I disagree with that.
Well, and I'll finish. Scott, you said there's no consistency among the line. No consensus, consensus along the northwest line.
Early on when we were developing, when we had the 3 options, we went out and discussed this at dozens of meetings, and we had, varying opinions, with Boulder and Boulder County. Very
I wanted the BRT.
BRT.
Yeah.
We had, middle of the corridor. We're supportive of rail or BRT, depending upon exactly.
The reason there's no consensus is that you picked us off one by one.
Sorry?
You picked us off one by one. You bought us off bought them off one by one. You got the city of Boulder, their BRT, Boulder County staff, BRT, and commissioners, BRT. Now we throw a bone to, RTD throws a bone to Westminster. They get their rail. The rest of us are left holding the bag. That's where there's no consensus.
Could I address that?
Sure, if you'd like.
Well, I think in the first place, I don't think we're quite that smart to pick you off one by one. What we put together was a comprehensive plan that, as I said before, does provide the mobility options that address the most people within the region in the shortest time frame possible, and that do still permit us to build the entire Northwest Rail line. And the other part of it where you mentioned Westminster, what that does is that addresses a very real need. Currently, the HOV lanes coming along I-25 from Denver Union Station, north or south, they're unidirectional at rush hour. What building to Church Ranch allows us to do is to, for the reverse commute trips, allows us to give people the option to transfer to the rail there and avoid that choke point where you're basically swimming upstream against the commute that is coming out. So there is a very real transit benefit to that, and I would take issue with your characterization of that. This was done as part of a comprehensive transit plan that was taken out. We did explore all of the options. There was no consensus around any single one of the options, and the hybrid option that we developed was in part
because there's always a wink behind the back with Boulder, the city of Boulder and Boulder County, about all they're interested in the BRT. They're not interested in rail whatsoever. Matt Applebaum confirmed it when I was at a meeting. They're only interested in the BRT. They're not interested in rail. They'll do anything. The rail's the best thing, is what he told me. The best thing since sliced bread. You're gonna love it. It's the greatest thing ever. That's all we care about. You picked us off one by one. The other thing is, Nadine, regarding the freeway running. I just came back from Houston, and I've seen what Houston Metro has done with the HOV lanes. Are we going to make these lanes, these managed lanes on the highway, large enough so if there's a flat tire or somebody breaks down, how is that going to happen, and how is that going to obstruct the flow of BRT?
So there's a couple things that are going on with our managed lanes project, and I'll use US 36 as the example. On US 36, we have a managed lane that's separated from the general purpose lanes by a 4-foot buffer. And then on the inside, where the median is, or the barrier is, there's actually another 12-foot shoulder there that will accommodate any breakdowns or accidents, whatever, so that the buses are not inhibited by an accident in the lane. The other thing that will also be available, we're working with CDOT right now to develop a bus on shoulder running policy to help our what we call our all-stop service, which is a service that it's not the express service, so it's not going, for example, from Denver Union Station to Table Mesa without stopping. It's actually stopping at every stop along the way, because a true BRT really does stop at every stop, just like a rail does. So for that concept, because our stations are on the outside at the interchange ramps, we're providing the bus on shoulder option so that the buses can actually run in the shoulder when the general purpose lanes are too congested for the buses to continue moving and provide a reliable travel time. So
it's really not a true BRT,
though. Which part?
Either. True BRT is buses running only. No HOV, single occupant, double occupant. That's not, allowing HOV into those lanes is not a true BRT.
There's, I think that most BRT experts would tell you that you can actually make BRT what you want it to be, and most BRTs, you don't.
We have BRT right now than 119.
You have so many buses in those lanes sometimes. I mean, it just depends on how much bus capacity you have. And I think, the benefit on US 36 of allowing the single occupant vehicles tolled is that helps pay for the project. And so from a financing perspective, it's what made the project work.
Well, I talked to Mayor Pat Quinn today of Broomfield. And I asked him, I said, Pat, well, are you in for this option 4? No, not really. I'm going to support the US 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition letter, and I think that's probably the best option for us is talking to him, trying to stay unified instead of picking us off. And I'm sorry, you have picked us off one by one. So I would move that we allow the March 16th letter from the US 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition and 36 Solutions be the official policy of the city. And the other thing is, again, Mayor, leadership is also making sure that you're getting the best benefit for this community and holding RTD to the highest standard possible to what the voters voted for, and not just by saying, hey, we're just going to just tax the hell out of us and we'll get it here sooner. I'll finish my sentence. That is not going to go over very well in Longmont when you keep cutting our local services, and people are saying they're cutting our local services, but then they want us to pass a tax for something we may or may not get. It's not going to fly.
First off, I'd like to comment. I've been to several of these meetings with all the mayors. Sometimes as many as 2 a week. And there wasn't a consensus. We were always somewhat divided. So, to your defense, it wasn't a consensus. But 2, I don't even know how I'm going to vote on this thing. I do think that it's important that the citizens get a chance to decide. It's not up to Longmont City Council to decide for our citizens. So I'd like to see it at least get to the process where the citizens get a chance to vote. That's all I'm advocating for. And I still stand that nobody in this day and age absolutely has absolute 100% guarantees. We can ask for the best guarantees, but, I worked on projects, things that have never been done in aerospace before, and it was really hard to estimate exactly how much something that's never been done before is going to cost. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. So I understand that. But anyway, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I just wanted to ask you one quick question, because you implied that I made the comment that I feel like we're subsidizing other communities, and your comment was, well, many communities feel that way. Okay, so I'll give you that. All I want is the data. Since 2004, how much has Longmont paid in to Fast Track? Do we have that data?
I can try to get that for you. Under the state system, the RTD does not collect sales tax. The state of Colorado does.
Okay.
And under the new computer system that they do not have the ability to break it down by individual community. We have asked for that information before. So we can request to see if they have a way of doing that, or, the city of Longmont is more than welcome to make that request.
So, but it's fair to say that we've paid in money, and if we haven't gotten anything, the delta is significant. Can we agree on that?
One of the things that is also embedded in the Fastracks program is an increase in funding for bus service, 1% increase per year, which, now, granted, we have had to make service trims, cuts within Longmont because the ridership has not been there. The reality is, without that additional funding, it likely would have been worse, given the funding scenarios that we faced. So there has been a certain amount that has gone toward the overall transit network. If you are talking about specific capital things, then no, you're correct. That is, again, one of the reasons why we believe that moving forward sooner rather than later to offer something. Again, the public will ultimately make the decision as to whether or not they want to wait till 2042, or if the board decides to put something on the ballot, whether or not they want something sooner. There's no two ways about that.
I thought that Fast Track and the RTD tax were two separate buckets.
That is correct.
So didn't you just say that some of the money from Fast Track was used for RTD?
Embedded in the Fastracks language that there is a 1% per year increase in rubber-tired bus service that was approved by voters. That is permitted because the voters approved that to fund rubber-tired service. As I said, had we not had that amount of funding, then the service changes that we have had to go through until the economy recovers would likely have been worse. So there is, a transit benefit from the Fastracks program on the rubber-tired service side that was approved by voters.
Mayor, if I could just add, maybe the Fastracks was a system, and the system involved mostly rail, commuter rail, light rail, some BRT on US 36, and as Scott indicated, some increase in bus service. So the system as a whole works together. It's not segmented into little sections or one community versus another community.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my worst fear is if the voters, Mayor, they do pass the tax. And if they do pass the tax and the fringe communities, and there's no deadline, no commitment, we're going to wind up going from, we're already paying 1% to 1.4%. I mean, if we buy Longmont, 1.4% of my income is now going to RTD. I don't like that. And so I'm going to be with those of us on council who are going to back the letter for the US 30 or the Northwest Corridor. And I know how I'm going to vote. I'm going to be very vocal in speaking out against tax increase of any kind because I don't think the train's coming. So I'm going on the record now. I'm against this.
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you. I've held back speaking and pushing on the button just because I wanted to hear all the stuff that came out. Let me tell you what I've seen, and I've seen it from that side of the audience as well as being on this side. I remember sitting on that side of the audience in 2006 at a city council meeting with some other hearing I was sitting for, and one of my neighbors, one seat over, sitting there reading The Economist. It was 06, and there was an article in The Economist, which is a global weekly magazine, very conservative, that applauded Denver and RTD for taking a extremely bold move in having embarked on a regional transportation system. And it takes a lot to get something in The Economist, a full column or two. And mostly you have to be greasing your melting down.
you have to be grease and you have to be melting down in your economy to get more than just a column or two in the Economist. But a lot of these big transit systems take political will. So I applaud you for the vision of it, number one. Number two, with what I've seen here, some of the options that have not been available to our citizens have been thinking that you have to go to Boulder to get to Lafayette or Louisville. I mean, I know people that were commuting into Louisville 2 hours a day. When I first looked at that map down South Boulder Road, I thought, well, this is sort of nuts. But then I realized that we have no option from Longmont except to go through Boulder to get to those other communities. And so in some ways, what you presented is less Boulder-centric in some regards. But also, I would ask you to remember that, you know, Longmont still has room to grow. In fact, we might have an ultimate capacity in matching Boulder in the number of heads who sleep in Longmont every day and work here and want to have transit options. So Longmont should be very important just from a sheer numbers, because Boulder doesn't have much to add for population, but surely we do. And we're going to be moving around the region. I'm not willing to sit here and pass judgment on past rosy calculations on tax revenue and everything else. You know, it's just like if you bought a home somewhere and your budget and what you're allowed to pay every month can't exceed $2,000, yet your taxes keep going up and everything else. So what you do is you extend the principal time further out so that you can meet your bill requirements every month. If your maximum for your household budget says you can't pay more than X for principal, interest, taxes, utility, and everything else, and that's an absolute guarantee, that's all that you can do, you have to wiggle somewhere. And where the wiggle is that you drive the principal out further. I mean, I have friends in California that had 40 and 50-year mortgages because that's the only way they could afford to make a house payment. So that's the reality that we're dealing with here, is that, you know, when you've had the budget you've had and the cost increase and the profitability of the railroad in this particular corridor being the most unique of anything, I think you've done an admirable job of trying to address this conundrum. And it's a terrible conundrum because they can make a heck of a lot more money running freight. The more gas prices go up, the more freight they can run, the more profitable that line is. And frankly, I don't think we could afford to just go and start buying up, you know, swatches to put a brand new rail system in. You know, we can't just do that. So what are the options we're left with? We have to live with what the reality is. So I'm not so, I actually was there Thursday night when you guys came up and had the outreach meeting from the Citizens Committee. And I appreciate you coming up because there weren't very many people in the audience. I think the commission, the committee, and you guys outnumbered us in the audience. But it's not that we're disinterested. I think that what I've heard from fellow council members is, you know, darn it, we've been paying on that mortgage and payment every month, and we want to see our principal, you know, we want to be able to burn that deed, you know, of trust one day. And we want to know that the deed of trust is that our principal will be paid off and the project will be completed. But then we have this other nasty little item about the fact that everything keeps going up in cost, and there's some uncontrolled aspects. To address some of the concerns with council members, you know, we could ask that language would be written into the guarantee in the ballot language that would be extremely punitive to RTD. I have friends who write a punitive clause in any time they have an addition put on their house. Like, if you don't get it done by this day, every day it's not done, you owe us $1,000. I don't know if you guys would agree to that, but that might make Councilmember Bagley really happy. And to address some issues around the consolidation or the consensus building, when I was at National League of Cities, you know, I interacted with a lot of people in the Front Range cities that were there also. And, Mayor of Westminster, I sat down and talked to her, and she told me categorically, I said, are you going to let us hang out to dry here in Longmont? And she said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I trust not only Nancy McNally, I also feel like I have to have trust. If everything's going to work on the Front Range in our region, we have to trust the other communities around us too. And I think that symbolically, what The Economist heralded RTD's vision for was to have some consolidation around this. I'll also throw out that, maybe we're sort of like the Gauls or the Roman or the English or England, Great Britain, when the Romans showed up, because, they didn't want to build that last piece of aqueduct to get fresh water out there, for the conquered community. So, but eventually they did. And the aqueduct is still standing today. I visited several of them. And so those communities had fresh water built by that massive machine of the Roman Empire. So I'm not saying RTD is the massive machine of the Roman Empire. You're not. There are no centurions behind you. But I really think that on these big public projects, you have to have a bit of political will and a bit of faith. And I think I have some faith in the system still, and I think that the political will is really up to every community's council to say, we're going to lock, arms at the elbow and say, we're going to get this thing done. And, frankly, we can continue to berate the board. Your board's going to change. Our boards are going to change, but I think we have to have that larger community conversation, which is what you're attempting to do in the stakeholders meetings. But my advice to you is, remember, Longmont is actually probably going to be the biggest city besides Boulder. In fact, Boulder may lose population to us because we're better. And we always will be better. So, and I think it's the more people come to Longmont, we're going to be wanting those transportation options, and I think people are willing to pay for them. And I would have faith that, frankly, you guys have been given the worst of all possible tasks. You had another set of decision makers who gave rosy projections, and then we had the worst economic meltdown since the Great Depression. Oh, I'm sorry, that was your fault too, right? And then everything's getting back on its feet slowly, but nobody even really knows how much more progress we're going to make in the economic recovery. And so as conservative as you can be, I support, Dr. Cog taking a look at all of this too. Having an independent set of auditors take a look at your work to see whether or not there's any flaws in your projection model, I think is a great idea. So I'm of the same thought as the mayor that we need to let this go through the process, and then frankly, I'd be willing to give you guys the benefit of some time and, if you will, doubt to come up with the right verbiage and test it out on whether or not you're going to write in certain kinds of guarantees. And, if you can give us, maybe $1,000 a day for every day you're late, we could do something with that. I don't know. We have some little projects we could do in Longmont. So, but I'm not sure which, when the motion was made to support which letter. I see there are two letters with different dates on them.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I, too, appreciate you guys coming down here to talk to us. This has to be very hard to go community to listen to everyone complain. I ride RTD almost every day. I'm dependent on it to get to work. So I have a little more in the game than most people who sit up here. But it's a trust issue. It really is a trust issue. When we voted for rail in 2004, we thought we were going to get rail, and yet I sat on this city council and we had an option where we weren't going to get rail, even though the people voted for it. So there is a trust issue, and I fear that if there is something on the ballot, that Longmont won't pass it, because we don't think that, as Councilmember Bagley said, that it's ever going to come. And we think it could be jerked away from us because we've seen it proposed by RTD in writing. And shame on us for not demanding assurances in 2004. You know, shame on us for voting for something that didn't have some assurances. We all kind of just hoped and saw the big vision and wanted it so bad that we just voted for it without some assurances, and shame on us for doing that. And I, too, along with Councilmember Bagley, would like to see some numbers as far as, I know that there is a way to tell us what we pay for Fastracks, and I know that there is a way to determine what comes back to Longmont. And you said something else that I was confused about. You said that ridership in Longmont had decreased, and that's the reason the bus service has decreased. Is that correct?
What I should have said is that ridership in Longmont did not meet the service standards. Therefore, the service levels were decreased. So ridership, the service standards that we have are depending upon the type of service, whether it's a local, express, regional.
But can you tell me, has ridership decreased in Longmont?
Based on the previous service change, it fell below the service standards.
Does that mean there's less riders?
That I'd have to go back and look at. I don't know. I mean,
because as a bus rider, I have pictures on my iPhone of people standing on buses. I don't see any decrease in ridership.
You're talking regionals, aren't you?
I'm talking from Longmont to Denver.
Okay, that's a regional service, and that service has actually been increased.
And that ridership has been
Ridership
decreased?
has increased.
Okay, that ridership
You're
has
talking
increased.
only about the local service. The comment that was made was regarding cutbacks in the local service. The local service
No, but our regional service has had stops cut completely. We've had some decrease in service as well.
The regional service as a whole, serving Longmont, has actually increased over time.
There are stops that have been discontinued. That's a fact. I get letters from people.
On stops,
Yeah.
But if you are talking about the number of trips that serve Longmont on regional in general, all the different regional service that serves Longmont, that has increased over time.
Okay, I'll give you that one. My feeling is, your biggest supporters, people like me who ride RTD every day, will have a really hard time paying, when that goes to the ballot, paying more for something that we thought we already were going to get. So I would support Mayor Pro Tem Santos's motion.
Can I ask a quick question? Did you sign up for rider alerts like I suggested last time? Okay. Just want to be sure you did so that you know if there are any changes or any service changes to your routes, you will get a personal email on that.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Councilmember Levison. The council options in our council communication, I moved number 2, which was to allow the March 16th letter from the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition and the 36 Commuting Solutions to the RTD stand as the official position of the city. It was mentioned that, someone's been to more meetings than others. I've been on council almost 4 years, served on the Transportation Advisory Board, been to many RTD board meetings, in fact, one where we met on a Monday and my child was born that night. I mean, I was here at that meeting while my wife was in labor, and then left. Got her to the hospital, lickety-split, and we had another little girl. Looking at the numbers, and speaking of those 2 little girls, I have a 6 and a 3-year-old, and I'm a very proud daddy. 2034, my oldest will be 29. My youngest will be 26. I can't get past the realization that my 6-year-old is about to turn 7 in October, and my 4-year-old is going to turn 4 in September. That's ridiculous. That's why, again, I think the options that are there are not really what benefits the corridor. I think the letter stands and does a really good job. 4 months of meetings does not make one an expert. Having been here many times.
I was just disputing
and I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm still in the middle of the sentence. Councilmember Levison and I have been here the longest, and we've been into a lot of these RTD meetings and other meetings that we've gone to regarding transportation and Fastracks. I'm disappointed. I was very supportive, but I'm getting to the point, And as I said at your meeting, I'm getting very distrustful because I keep hearing things change. Show me the fine print. Again, it's like a used car sales deal. Yeah, it's great. It gets this gas mileage, and here. Well, show it to me on the paper. Show it to me on the paper. Show me the guarantees. Show me some assurances. Show me something besides maybe 2028, maybe 2034. So that, that's Councilmember Levison. That was my motion. Was option 2 that we have been provided.
Councilmember Samori.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Sometimes we have to deal with the facts as they are on the ground. And I appreciate everybody's position. I feel the same frustration that everybody does about not having it when we thought we would. But realistically, 2042 is not an option, right? And what I've heard is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the RTD team board is willing to meet with us and discuss certain guarantees or wording that can be put into the ballot that would satisfy our requirements. And I think it's worth pursuing and not shutting the door on that. And the other thing that I heard is that the board, as well as council, changes over time. And there's no way for us to really know whether the new board that gets put in place is going to support whatever the old board put in. And as we just recently experienced, anybody can change the terminology and come up with a new ballot when the need is there. So we have a conundrum. We can take a hard stand and say, no, we're going to stick to the original. Or we can give this option a chance, and we still have an opportunity to say no if we don't agree to the wording that comes on the ballot. Just, I know there's a lot of emotions, and I'm not any happier with RTD that any of you are. But I think we need to maybe pull the emotions back and think of it from a rational, logical perspective, and do what's what can be best for the community.
Councilmember Witt.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. So what I believe we are supporting with option 2 is to not take an official stand until we get more information. And I think that's what this allows it to do, is to go forward, get more information, go through the process, and not take an official stand on this. It seems as if a lot of us really do have questions still, and that's why I seconded Mayor Pro Tem's motion on that. But I think that it'll give us a little bit more time and clarity on language, so that's why I supported it.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess I want to clarify to make sure that my line isn't so fine. What I'm adamant against is the hybrid option that brings it to basically North Denver and then provides us no service. I don't see the option that you're providing as being an option that will ever serve Longmont. I don't think that a promise of incremental rail and someday we'll get it to you is going to benefit us. I don't think that will happen. Now, am I open to listening and seeing ballot language, reading guarantees, etc.? Absolutely. So I guess my hard stance is your proposal? Absolutely not. Am I willing to listen to additional ideas, ballot measures, etc.? Sure. Just not currently what's on the table here, which is why I like the letter as well.
Actually, I think we're all in agreement that just let the process follow its natural course and see where it takes us. Councilmember Levison.
I want to make a comment, and Gabe, since you've been here the longest, you will probably remember. Well, we both have, along with me. You'll remember that some of us on council in previous years have been actually pushing to move quicker to do our station area plan. And in my opinion, moving quicker on that in the past would have brought more attention from RTD, meaning we're going to plan this thing, we're going to plan for transit, and we're going to be more ready than you are. And in retrospect, I'm very sorry that we weren't a year ahead of where we are right now on getting that master plan in place, because, we started on that in 08. We were ready to start working on that. Councilmember Blue and I were both on the committee trying to choose the first round of consultants, and then we held up the process because of the economic meltdown. But, we're really going gangbusters on that. And I also want to thank you because one of your staff members early on in the meeting said, we're going to wait and see what Longmont comes up with, and then take the signal from what our community has planned in that region from us. And so to me, that means that you guys are actually listening. You've devoted some resources. And the other thing I see in the BRT option is that we kept telling you we want a faster solution than when the rail gets here. And so when you come up with something, I think it's a bit unfair for us to say, well, you mean that's not fast enough. We want it to start tomorrow. And it's a little, I want to be realistic and fair always to people. And I think that I understand those challenges. And, I'm a mom. I can't cook dinner any faster, even though somebody's really, really hungry. And they want it 5 minutes ago. So, I understand your challenges, and I'm willing to cut you some slack. Maybe I'm the only one who's willing to cut you some slack, but, I always appreciate it when people cut me slack too. So, maybe you'll have to cut Longmont some slack sometime, but I still have faith in the bigger picture.
Mayor Pro Tem Santos.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Levison. Yeah, I remember when that happened. We stopped. We didn't know we were getting $17 million at the time. And with that, in fact, I actually also heard that we probably won't even get the full 17. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Do you want clarification on that?
I got clarification at the last meeting when Chairman Kemp was there, and he says, "Well, you're guaranteed the 17. We'll see."
I mean, it is in the budget.
It's in the budget, but
and it is in our short-term budget.
But what I've heard, and we can have the same argument. What I've heard is that I can't guarantee anything. So that's what I've heard. So I'm going to be a little skeptical about whether or not we're going to get $17 million, because I've heard it through the grapevine. We may not even get it all.
Well, we've got a motion and a second. Is everybody ready to vote on it? It passes unanimously 7-0.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I would like to say something in closing, if it's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you for allowing us to come up here again. Believe it or not, I do hear you. I do hear you. I don't blame you for being frustrated. The board of directors, the staff is frustrated in regards to how we keep this thing moving forward. We will continue to work every day to make sure Fastracks is completed. We will. If the voters don't end up passing this, the original ballot will do it will take its course. It will get completed. We just have been trying to accelerate this. Accelerate it in a manner that we can get it done sooner rather than later. If the voters decide that they don't want it done sooner rather than later, that's fine. That's the course we will take. We are just trying to work out options that are viable options that meet the needs of the whole region on getting this thing done sooner rather than later. So I hope you would at least consider that and understand that as far as our mission moving forward. And that's it. but I do understand where you're coming from. Nobody wants the north corridor more than me, or the northwest corridor more than me. You know, the North I-25 EIS has an embedded rail element within it that would come up I-25 and come across 119 to come into the Longmont station to go on up north to Fort Collins. I would love to see that happen. That happens because you would end up with a station here to make that part of a reality. I want to see rail get done up here. The board wants to see rail get done up here. I don't know how more passionately I can tell you that. We want it done. And thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing us to come up and discuss this one more time.
Lee, I'd like to thank you and Scott and Nadine for your excellent presentation. And thanks again for coming up. Well, it's time for mayor and council comments. Okay, I guess we'll pass on that. Thanks again, folks. City manager, any remarks?
See you at your regular meeting tomorrow night.
Okay. City attorney?
No comments, Mayor.
All right. It's adjourned. Uh-oh, excuse me. Councilmember Ragley.
I was just going to ask if you were going to recognize the new face in the audience. He's technically a new member of staff.
Oh, yes, he's directly in line. Well, well, thank you for coming and listening to all this, Harold, and welcome to Longmont.